Welcome to Pain with a Purpose, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of resilience, redemption, and purpose. I'm your host, Chris Woods, and each week we will sit down with guests who have faced challenges with substance abuse, mental health, and recovery. But we're not just dwelling on the past. Instead, we'll explore what keeps them driven towards a purposeful life. Join us as we navigate the journey from pain to a purpose.
With that, welcome back to Pain with a Purpose, Season 2, Episode, what did I say, 8?
8.
Right? 8, which is like kind of flying by, which is insane, with Lauren Lyons.
Yep.
Right? That's
Yeah. I'm still getting used to the name change.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Congrats.
Thank you.
And you were most recently on a honeymoon?
I
right?
was. Yeah, we were.
Where'd you guys go?
We went on a cruise to St. Kitts, St. Martin, St. Thomas, and the Bahamas.
Okay. So you hit all the spots.
It was really nice. Hard to come back.
Especially being from where you guys live, which is technically paradise. And now sitting in, 30 minutes from Philadelphia, it's not it's not what you were just like on the cruise with.
No. And this morning when we woke up, it was cold in Florida for Florida weather. It was 63, and I looked at my watch. I'm like, in a couple hours, we're going to have those numbers flipped, and it's going to be a rude awakening.
So, like, when you guys, like, fly up here, like, do you get on the flight with the warm clothes, or do you pack them, and you're like, okay, as soon as we get there, we know that we're, like, in for a rude awakening?
We were dressed for warm weather this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cold. I was in a hoodie and sweatshirt, but I don't own a winter jacket.
Yeah, you don't need one.
So my aunt lent me. She was like, I have jackets laid out for you. Stop by my house. So that was our first stop because I was in need.
Did you guys, is that where you guys are staying when you're up here? Or did you guys get a hotel?
We stay at my dad's.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Both my parents live, I guess 15 minutes from each other. My dad's in Cherry Hill. My mom's in Marlton.
Okay.
But we always stay at my dad's.
Yeah. So like the worst roads ever in Jersey where you have to like, just to make a left, you got to make a whole roundabout.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you went through all that pain.
Maybe. My life was one big roundabout.
Yeah. So we'll jump into it, right? We don't really know each other at all. Respect the hustle though, because you reached out.
Thank you.
And you continued to like follow up. And like that's what I was like, you know what? Like, let's do it.
Oh yeah.
So give me a little bit about like what you live in Florida now, right?
I
you
do.
grew up in Jersey.
Yep.
How did you end up in Florida?
By ways of Maine and Rhode Island. And, eventually the pain was so strong and, reached out to people who were like, Florida's the answer, but it was a long road to get there.
Yeah. And we'll talk about all that. But when did you get to Florida? Like what year?
I got to Florida in May of 2019.
And you've been like on the road to recovery since then, or
Yep.
Love that. Okay. Which is not always the case, right? Like we do see a lot of people that come in and out and stuff like that. And
that South Florida shuffle is real, but
I
shuffled my way before I got to Florida. So by the time I got to Florida, I was
the crazy
done.
thing is like, and what we were kind of just talking about is like that same shuffle is going on the East Coast now, or like, up here and PA, the tri-state, so it's not like, it's not because anybody that doesn't mean well or anything like that. It's just like, there's so much treatment centers everywhere, that, everybody means well, like I said, but I also knew that if I left, I could just go somewhere else or whatever the case may be. So what'd you do? You just grew out of it?
I think so. I think, I think I was just done.
Yeah.
I think that geographical relocation was something that I think every addict at some point can speak on that they tried. And I tried it and I can attest it does not work until you're ready. Nothing works until you're ready.
Yeah. So I was like half joking when I was like, "Do you just grow out of it?" Right. Because like I've heard a lot of people that, and I'm sure you did too. I don't know how many times you attempted to go to treatment or things like that. But for me, I wasn't one or done.
Only one.
Really?
I'm a one-chip wonder for like in the reality sense of like, I only went to treatment one time. How many times did I like on my own try and cut back or get sober? I mean, those are countless, right? But
that's almost worse.
In actuality, I only went to treatment one time, and I only ever picked up one white chip.
Okay. All right. So once you like tried to get like a real attempt at recovery, right? Like you picked up a white chip and you were able to like maintain your sobriety. What I was kind of alluding to is like, I can remember how many times I was like, I'm just going to detox myself. I'm going to sit on, like, I'm going to eat, whether I'm at my mom's house or, and I would make it a certain number of days. And then like this thing would just start to take off. And I'm like, it wasn't that deep, you know? And then I would go back and it was like, just like such a miserable existence.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For me, in any aspect of my life, I think I'm a really black or white person, which looking back was all of my, active addiction stages of life as well. Like I'm all in or all out. So that gray area really just never worked.
Yeah.
And it's transitioned into the rest of my life as well. If I'm committing to something, I have to be all the way in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and that like, there's a lot of people like us, right, that are not drug addicts and alcoholics or whatever we're referring to, but they don't suffer from the same thing that we suffer from. So it's not like at any given day deadly to them.
Right.
So it's interesting that like, especially like for me in school, when I was like first starting off in high school or whatever, it was like a fresh start, right? I was never a student, but when I finally got to high school, I went to this local Catholic high school in the city. Everybody in my family was excited. Who thought that I was even going to end up there? The fact that I was there was great. And like freshman year, I'm like the guy that's like perfectly writing my name, right? Like studying. 4 weeks in, I'm like, I could care less, you know? And it's like, I'm a great starter. But if it's not like really holding my attention or like giving me some sort of
engagement
or relief or I'm enjoying it, like I want nothing to do with it. And like I lived my life like that for a long time.
Totally.
Still do in different aspects, right? And like there's whatever, we could have a whole episode on that too. All right, so you got to Florida, picked up a white chip eventually in 2019. It's almost 2025.
Yeah, now. Coming up on 6 years, God willing.
Love that. How do you maintain it?
So I'll be honest, for a long time, I was really committed to meetings. And, some people might be offended by what I'm about to say. And, I apologize if that makes someone feel a type of way. But as life happens and as my life has propelled in certain ways, I'm not saying that meetings aren't important or that they don't work, because they never stopped working and they're never not important. But I guess I had just drifted away from the rooms. And I still practice principles in my everyday life. I still pray actively. And I still, maintain a moral inventory on a regular basis. So I would say that the 12 steps are still a very active part of my lifestyle and my daily living. But as far as actual meetings goes, I haven't been in a little while, to be honest.
And there's nothing wrong. Listen, I'll be the first one to tell you, like, contrary to the belief or what we hear or what some of even my friends will say, that's okay.
Yeah.
I struggled for a really long time in my sobriety. Because like I thought that I needed to be sponsoring more guys or I needed to be doing this, and this to like get back to a better place spiritually. But I also forgot about all the other stuff that was said to me early on, where it was like, I went to AA or I went to a 12-step fellowship, so I didn't need a 12-step fellowship.
Correct.
I also had 2 kids, right? Got a career, got married, and like life gets really, really busy. And I'm also not suffering from a drink or a drug. So like very much it's a controversial topic, right?
For sure.
What I say for like the newcomer that's coming in, like, no, it absolutely saved my life. But,
100%. And I was hitting, multiple meetings a day in the beginning. And, I was an active member of a home group for a very long time. And I still maintain communication with a lot of the women, in recovery. A lot of my best friends are in recovery. And I stay in active communication with them. I still go to sober events and local things that are happening within, whether it be treatment to treatment kind of, dodgeball tournaments or networking events. So I stay active in the community. But as far as meetings go, that is just something that my life has drifted away from, maybe because I'm super busy, maybe because I don't know. I don't really have an answer for it. It's just what's happened.
I mean, and that's the issue that I have internally, right? Where it's like, why do I feel like I need to have an answer for it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is me just being really, really transparent. But it's like, why? Why was that instilled into me? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that I got sober a certain way through like the big book, and like, you know, there was definitely a time where I would try to beat you over the head with the big book if I could. Yeah. And there's still times where like I'm there for people that want to talk about stuff like that, but my truth is that like I'm okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there's some stuff that I do in my daily life that like really, really help me mentally, spiritually, you know, the whole deal. If I hit a meeting, that's great, but like if I don't, I'm not gonna like hold myself to the fire and be like, what the fuck? You know, like I can't do that.
Right. And like, didn't we get sober so that we could live this full life?
Mm-hmm.
And my life is full. And I'm super grateful for AA and for the program and the principals for teaching me how to live and showing me, you know, the other side. And then there is a full life available if I want it. Right. And now I have this amazingly full life, and I still maintain the principles, but shouldn't say I don't need the meetings, but it's just not an active part of my daily living.
It's a really, and we're going to continue to talk about it. And now hopefully we're not like, you know, beating a dead horse here, but like my truth is that like recovery is still very much my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in my life, everybody that's supportive in my life is in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have, because the gifts of recovery, I don't have the means to get to a meeting every day. I really don't.
No, 100%. That's
furthermore,
exactly.
I also don't have, I wouldn't be able to get to a meeting maybe even 3 times a week. Right. It's just like, it's tough.
I mean, this is kind of like a meeting.
Yeah. I mean, but like, yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, it is definitely language of the heart.
All you need is 2 people to have a meeting. So in a sense, these podcasts are almost like a meeting.
Yeah, for sure. You know, but as soon as I start taking credit for that, then people will finally start commenting. They'll be like, oh yeah, okay. What do you got? I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. But yeah, so, I mean, regardless, right, the whole moral of the story is that, like, your life is still very much about recovery, you know, and you've found what works for you.
Absolutely.
Especially in this day and age, like, who are we to say what can and can't work or what should and shouldn't work?
I couldn't
Especially
agree
with,
more.
like, the new medications that a lot of people are on for, like, harm reduction and everything like that. Like, and I'm worried about somebody saying I'm not hitting enough meetings. Come on.
Right. Everyone, just like everyone's journey in addiction and alcoholism look different, everyone's journey in recovery is going to look different too.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't matter what it looks like. It should matter that you're free at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my opinion. And that's what I live by.
Yeah. So not to go too much into it or too much further into it, right? Let's talk about like growing up in Jersey, and like what led to you going to, I know you mentioned a few different places, right?
Yeah.
But eventually ending up in Florida. Like what happened, right? Because I'm sure you were raised with morals and values. I'm sure you know what was right and wrong.
Yeah. I mean, grew up with my mom and my dad, younger sister. She's 3 years younger. Outside looking in, pretty normal, happy family. Really, honestly, not to toot my own horn, very smart growing up. Super, if I applied myself, which, you know, at a young age was pretty hard not to, I have like a sponge of a memory, as everyone always says. So excelled in school. Never had any issues with that. Outside of school, I danced like every night of the week. Grew up dancing and then turned into competitive dancing. Always kind of struggled with appearance insecurities. So I think from a young age, that was something that was always bothersome to me. Internally, I was never really happy with how I looked externally. And, you know, when you're a kid, you can't really pinpoint those things. But looking back and reliving parts of my childhood, it's easy to see, right? They say hindsight 2020. It's very easy to see. And my household on the inside wasn't as, you know, wonderful as it appeared from the outside. You know, my mom love my mom. We didn't have a great relationship. We butted heads for a long, long time. I'm for sure, my dad's girl, always have been, still am, love him. And he struggled with his own demons. I mean, he's a successful businessman, built his business from, the bottom up throughout my entire, childhood and still. But he struggled with alcohol, and he and my mom did not get along and stayed in a marriage that was unhealthy for longer than they probably should have. And I have memories of them that will be instilled in my brain forever. And they didn't get divorced until I went to college. So it was a long time of toxicity within the household. So, but, we grew up in Voorhees, and I don't know if you know Voorhees, it's right next to Cherry Hill. It's a great area. So it's like keeping up with the Joneses, right? It's like you don't want people to perceive what's going on inside as reality. You put on a show. And so I think from a young age, that's how I viewed the world, was like, it's okay to put on a mask and pretend everything's okay.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of my childhood was. And so went to college. My parents got divorced. I went to Towson.
Okay. That's in Jersey, right?
It's in Maryland.
Maryland.
Yeah, Baltimore County. And so went to college. My parents got divorced. My grandmother passed away right before I went for my freshman year, and her and I were really, really close.
Yeah.
So that hurt. And I would say that that's really when I would say I let go of the reins of trying to control what I was feeling internally, right? And I just went nuts. I had no parental control. I was, living in a dorm in a college town where I could get into any bar I wanted, go to class if I wanted to, but who wants to, right? And I would say that I really just kind of lived adulthood to the fullest at the age of 18, right? And, when you're that age, you think you know everything. But in reality, like, I knew nothing about the world. And, I did not finish school at Towson. I had fun, but I didn't finish, right? And so I came home. At this time in my life, it's a lot of this time is kind of a blur. My mom and I, like I mentioned to you, didn't have a great relationship, and they were divorced at this time. She chose to have my sister live with her, but didn't want me in her house, and it hurt.
Yeah, it's really tough.
It hurt,
Were you and your sister were close?
We're close now. We're very different.
Yeah.
We have similarities, of course. We were raised in the same household. We're from a similar area. We have a lot of similar interests, but we're also very different. And we've always been different. And so, of course, my dad welcomed me with open arms, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, my dad's the cool guy. My dad's the cool dad. Of course, I would rather live with dad. Didn't let my mom really know how much pain it caused me to hear her say that she didn't want her own daughter to live with her. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, how can a mother say that to their child? Yeah. So it was not a fun time, but, so moved back in with my dad.
And are you, at this point, are you 21 yet or 19? Like 19, 20?
20.
Okay.
Yeah. And my dad and I, my dad, it's hard to explain my dad. I love my dad so much, but my dad also is very independent. He does his own thing. He's always trusted me to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't have like curfew and rules and a lot of things at my dad's house that I probably would have had at my mom's.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no fault to him for being that way. You know, he was like, you're an adult, right? Like, why should I have to helicopter you? You know, would I have had a different path going forward had I had more structure? We'll never know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started hanging out with friends of mine who I've been friends with for a long time. Again, after I came back, and they are still my best friends to this day. They're amazing, amazing, amazing women who have stuck by me through literally everything. I'd given them every reason in life to not be my friend.
Yeah.
And life has a funny way of keeping people in your circle, you know, when you need them the most. But yeah, we had a great time. You know, we started going to a ton of live music. That was what I found joy in. I've traveled the country. I've been to, I don't even know how many states, a lot, whether been to them or driven through them.
This is sounding either a lot like EDM or Fish.
So a little bit of both. Started out a mix, transitioned to the jam band side.
Okay.
You know, started with a lot of Lotus, Bass Nectar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going back 15 years now, you know? But yeah, tons of music all the time, which really filled me with what I felt like I was missing.
Mm-hmm.
And it did. Music is still to this day a huge part of my life. And I've had great experiences through it, right? I've gotten to go to Colorado and go to Red Rocks. I've been to California. I've been to Montana. Did I experience a lot of what the state had to offer? Not really. I saw the inside of hotel rooms and I saw concerts, but I've met amazing people along the way and had incredible experiences. And I went and saw Mo, which is my favorite band, in New York City one of the years while I was living with my dad, and met this guy named Connor. I probably shouldn't have said his name. Met this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up being really good friends. Stayed in touch, would always see each other at shows, meet up to go to certain shows, whether it be in Boston, DC, anywhere on the East Coast, really. And at this point in my life, I didn't really have any purpose or direction. I was working in hospitality. I was working in Center City, staying up till 3:00 in the morning, driving home, making it home safe somehow, waking up 3 hours later from not even a real sleep and going to work brunch, right? Like this was my weekends. There was no sense of purpose. It was just a routine. And it was like monotonous, right? It was like the same thing every day, every week, just kind of feeling lost, really, really lost. And that's, I think, the only really way to describe how I was feeling. And throughout those years, I also had a couple surgical procedures done. I had my gallbladder out, and I had a couple of other, normal childhood things. I think my wisdom teeth out. And, I don't need to tell you how pharmaceuticals can just really, take addiction to the next level. So that didn't help.
Pfizer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll just say that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that didn't help my feeling of lostness. And so the person that I told you I met, that guy, he lived in New Hampshire. And he was like, always telling me, like, why don't you move up here? Why don't you move up here? And like, what do you have going on, really? And in reality, I had nothing. And at this point in my life, as much as I love my dad and as much as he loves me, he had it with me. He had it with me at this point. And my mom and I weren't talking. My mom and I stopped talking shortly after she told me that I wasn't able to live with her.
Yeah.
So I didn't talk to my mom for a long time. And my dad at this point had it with me. He had found things in my room that he didn't like, things that were done in his house that he wasn't happy with, and rightfully so. I mean, at the time, I was like, you know, thinking like he's in the wrong for feeling this type of way. But like, as I've gotten older and sober and, you know, whatnot, I can look back and respect his, you know, respect his feelings. And so at that point, you know, he had it with me. He didn't really want me to live there anymore either. So I was like, you know what, screw it. And I packed my things and I drove up to New Hampshire. He was in college at the time. I was 24, 25. I think around that time, 26 maybe. I don't know. It was like 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do the math, 25. And he was in college. We went to UNH. We lived in Durham for a little while. And then when he graduated, we moved up to Southern Maine together. So that's how I wound up in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I still didn't find myself in Maine, you know? And in reality, it didn't help any sort of feeling of lostness at all. Still doing the same thing, honestly, seeing more music, because he really didn't have a purpose either. His purpose in life, and I think still to this day, his purpose in life is to party and have fun and be a man-child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, right? Like, that's his choice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing I can do about it, and that's okay. And I'm glad that it's not my issue, and it should have never been my problem. But,
mm-hmm.
you know, when you're dating someone, it's like it kind of, the responsibility at the time you feel like kind of falls on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was one of those extremely toxic relationships where it's
mm-hmm.
like, if I made a suggestion, he was like, well, you're not my mom. Don't tell me what to do. But if I didn't say anything, it was like, well, why didn't you remind me? You know, it was just one of those relationships that was really mentally and in multiple ways abusive and toxic. And it was horrible. It was really, really horrible. And I tried to hang on to the good times. You know, you fantasize and romanticize about things. And you just like, because your brain, I think, wants to shut out the bad things.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of like makes you forget. And you just think back and you're like, oh, but we had so much fun in Vegas. And, you know, we had a great time in California. When in reality, if you broke down the time we spent in Vegas or the time we spent in California or Colorado, there was more bad than good that happened in those times. The only good part about it was seeing the music.
Yeah.
But after the music, before the music, like none of that was fun.
It's literally the same exact thing as like, you know, when God forbid, when people relapse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like our heads go right to like, you know, the first time I felt, you know, my either drink of choice or drug of choice, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Wild analogy, but like this is the most spot
100%.
on that I had heard before was like, if you think about like a woman giving birth, right? It's literally one of the most painful things that someone can do. Yet women have multiple of children, right? But if they could remember like that pain and everything they've gone through, and this is not like, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not any of that. But it was a great analogy and kind of had like a light come on when I heard it. Like a woman would never do that again, right? Yet they're only talking or like, you know, kind of reminiscing about the good times, right? It's the same exact thing. You know, like our heads don't take us to like, no, it was horrible. You know what I mean? It's like, no, there was some good times and we try to hang on to that.
Exactly.
The really interesting thing about how like, whether this is right, wrong, or indifferent, like our brains try to almost protect us from the pain that we had gone through.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting that you use the analogy when a woman gives birth, because that segues right into my next part of my life. And, you know, a couple years into this relationship, I found out I was pregnant. And I didn't really know what to do, right? Like I wasn't happy. I had no purpose. I was living in this like little 1-bedroom apartment with someone that made my skin crawl. And at the same time, I knew that I wanted to continue with the pregnancy, right? And I knew that deep down, I could not be her mother. But there was no part of me that felt like it was okay to end the pregnancy. I'm not sure why. Again, like there's no answer, right? It was all God. Really, it was all God. And it's the biggest blessing of my life, today. And she was born in 2017, and she just turned 7. And I gave her up for adoption right when she was born. And I'm just grateful is like the only word I can use to describe the entire scenario, right? The people that adopted her are the most incredible humans. I prayed that she be with someone or people, like a family that could give her everything I couldn't, but love her like their own, right? Like I could give her love. I knew I could give her love.
Sure.
I couldn't give her anything else. And in a time of my life that looking back was I was such a selfish person, right? Most addicts and alcoholics are selfish people. I did probably the most selfless thing that anyone could do, and that is give her, away. And, that relationship has changed over the years. But in the beginning, it's always been open. It's always been an open adoption. But I didn't get sober after I had her. But I did call my mom the day after she was born. And I said, Mom, I need my mom. I know we haven't spoken in a really long time. At this point, it had been 6-7 years.
Wow.
A long time, really, since we'd spoken. And I said, please don't judge me. I just really need you. And since then, we've had like a really beautiful relationship, and I'm super grateful. That's just one of the blessings of, life that having my daughter has brought me. But, so I didn't get sober, and I knew that my decision was extremely selfless, but I used the feeling of not being a good enough mother and having to give my daughter up for adoption as a reason to continue addiction, right? I played the victim, knowing that I did something selfless, but at the same time turning it around as an excuse to continue to drink and get high.
Yeah.
And her father and I stayed together for a little bit longer. Realistically, we weren't together, but we stayed living together. And that lasted for a couple months. And then he moved out one night when I was at work, changed his number, blocked me on everything. I came home from work. The place was empty. He took everything. Like when I tell you it was 4 walls and a mattress, there was 4 walls and a mattress. Like nothing else was in the apartment. And you would think that would have been enough, right? You'd think that'd be a rock bottom. But I was like, well, I still have 4 walls, still have a job. I still have friends here. So I stayed there for a couple months. I obviously bought some necessities. And then someone else that I knew was like, you should move to Providence.
Rhode Island.
And
Okay.
Why I thought it was a good idea is really beyond me, but it really was, there's a reason, obviously. And I said, you know what, why not, right? Like I needed to get out of Maine. Like all of my memories of Maine were from those past couple years, and it was painful.
Yeah.
So I moved to Rhode Island, October of 2018. So if you do the math from then till when I came to Florida, didn't last long.
Yeah.
Did not last long. And it was miserable. And anyone who tells you that Providence is a good time is a liar. I mean,
it might be a good time
maybe
now,
not, right?
Maybe now, but like,
honestly,
in that
I have
mind
no
state,
desire to ever go back there. And I just,
yeah,
I'm sure there are parts of Rhode Island that are beautiful. But Providence is rough. It is rough.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, downtown Providence, there's a bus station called Kennedy Plaza.
Okay.
And that bus station takes you anywhere in Rhode Island you want to go. Because Rhode Island's small. So that's the epicenter, right? So when you think of an epicenter of a state, essentially, like, and downtown that takes you everywhere, what do you think is going on in that plaza, right?
Yeah.
That's where all
Everything,
of the people that if you're on the wrong path of life, like that's where you want to be, right? Everything you want, everything you need is right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't last long. I had a job. I had an apartment, right? Like I never really lost physical things in addiction, right? Like I always maintained a job and maintained enough money, I guess, to somehow get by to pay rent and whatnot. But I was miserable, absolutely miserable. I would wake up every day just trying to figure out how to not feel sick. I would shower 6 times a night because I was in so much pain. I was so miserable. And a friend of mine that I actually had met through seeing Mo, he just celebrated 20 years sober.
Love that.
His name's Mark Hodge. He's an incredible human being. He called me every single day. I'm not even kidding. Every day he called me for probably close to a year. And what are you doing? You need help. Are you ready? No. I don't need help. What are you talking about? Every single day. Same thing. One day, called me. He said, you need help. Same thing, right? And I said, yeah, but what's going to happen to my stuff? So instead of saying no, now I had, he had piqued my interest in some way.
The wheels are turning now, yep.
And he's like, Lauren, what are you talking about? Like, what stuff? Like, and I'm like, well, my clothes, my TV, my bed, like my stuff. And he's like, is that important? And I was like, well, yeah. And he's like, just go get sober. Everything else will follow. Just do it. I was like, all right, I'll think about it. Next day, I woke up and what he had said to me had just been playing over and over and over in my head. And I called him and I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all right, well, like, do you know where to start? And I honestly didn't really know where to start except to call my cousin. And my cousin Devin, she had struggled with addiction for some years of her life, and she'd gotten sober. And I was like, you know what? I'm comfortable with her. We're the same age. We've always gotten along really well. She's from like Egg Harbor Township area, Summers Point. And I was like, what is there to lose? So I called her, and she had basically was like, I actually just met this person in the hospital like 2 nights ago. I guess one of her other friends had overdosed or something. I forget exactly. She was like, call this guy. Like, he works for Burlington County. He helps people get into treatment. So I called him. I didn't have any sort of like no in me anymore. And so I called him. And I think that I was so done. I couldn't even get words out. I was in hysterical tears. And he was like, all right. He's like, listen, he's like, my boy, is at Princeton Detox. They have a place down in Florida. It's called Immersion. Would you go? And I was like, yeah, I'll go. And so 2 days later, I was on a plane. And thank you, God, to, John and Greg. And Greg's no longer with us, but thank you for them. They scholarshiped me. They saw hope when I didn't. And they are, like, between Mark and the two of them, I mean, they're a huge, huge active part of my reason for being sober today.
Absolutely.
And, from there, I went through the program. I went to Boca Detox because Immersion hadn't had the detox yet. Their residential facility had just been built. And I went through residential, PHP, IOP, did the 12 steps, moved into sober living from there. I moved into Roseway, and Megan has fantastic houses for women. She definitely, she helped me see what a woman in sobriety could be, right? And followed her dreams and allowed me to see that there is, really anything is possible. And she taught me a lot of really amazing things, and the principles that she lives by are something that are still ingrained in my head. And she's just an awesome person. So super grateful for that. And, after living there for, maybe 9 months, a friend of mine had an open room, and she lived on the beach, and she was sober as well. And she's like, move in with me. Like, do you want to move in? I need someone to move in. So I did. And I literally, when I tell you, I went and saw the room. and I walked, 100 steps maybe to the ocean from the house. And I was like, I've arrived, right? Like on a different level, I've arrived. This is what sobriety can be. Like I'm in paradise. Like, how can I ever go back to any other kind of life? And I still live in that neighborhood today. Lived with her for a while, got my own place, lived by myself for a little while, met my now husband. He moved in with me. Now we can live in the same building, but in another unit still to this day. I mean, as far as that stuff goes, like still living in paradise,
Yeah. I mean, you talked about all of it, right? And it's like such a beautiful story because like if there's God riddled in between all of it, right? Like if we were to like literally spend the next 2 hours, we could like dissect it and see like where God was and what, but
always.
Like in the moment, we probably don't see any of it. But that's pretty crazy. Shout out whoever that was that worked, in Burlington, right? Like, cause you called him from Rhode Island.
Yeah. So he actually, is no longer with us. He passed away, the February after I got sober. He overdosed on Valentine's Day and just couldn't. He was dealing with his own demons, and I remember that was my first hit in sobriety, where it was like not only like a wake up call that like just because you get sober doesn't mean that you're cured forever.
No,
and it was my first like real emotional hit in sobriety where I used proper tools and coping mechanisms to work through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to him because truthfully, he made me feel heard and supported and, really was a big part of getting me down here.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're in PA right now.
Well, you know what I mean. We're always in Florida in my mind, but yeah, getting me down to Florida.
Yeah. I mean, and the cherry on top, right, is like that someone's scholarship to, right? So like, I know a lot of people maybe like Greg, or like people in similar roles, right? Like, like get like a bad rep, but it's like, they don't see the other stuff that like the constant, like advocating for people that like don't have the resources for whatever it may be. Especially like, you calling him from however many states over.
Right. Yeah.
And he could have just been like, yeah, sorry, I'm in Jersey. My
dad thought I just wanted to go to South Beach to party, for the record. That was his first,
and how justified is that thought though?
It is. He was like, you just want to go to South Beach to party. And I was like, I promise, Dad. Like, I want to go to treatment.
Yeah.
And, Greg and John spoke to both my parents separately because getting them on the phone together was never going to happen. But, worked enough. He supported me enough that was able to advocate for me to them to help, basically get me to Florida along with the scholarship.
Yeah. And fast forward now, right? Like the beautiful life that you have.
It is.
So to kind of like fast forward and probably skip a ton of stuff. At what point? So I know a little bit about what you do for, we could call it work, but really your career, your profession. Like how did you get back into that? Because I know you didn't graduate from Towson.
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
I've always been like going way back. Like I mentioned, like I'm an intellectually smart person, like not to toot my horn, but I'm a pretty intelligent person. Always loved math, always good at numbers. And I'm a people person.
That should have been the first red flag. Like liking math is not okay.
Not geometry.
Yeah.
Nothing with like shapes and stuff really is math to me. But numbers, cool. I like numbers. And always been a people person, kind of fell into hospitality. That's what I always did throughout my like 20s, right? I was serving, I was bartending. It was easy. It was cash on hand every day. So in sobriety, I jumped right back into that, right? It was easy. It was a job. It paid my bills. It paid my rent. It did everything I needed it to do. It helped me build the life that I have, right? But I felt like I wasn't doing anything fulfilling. And because let's be honest, not to knock anyone in hospitality, but like for me, giving people a nice meal is cool, right? Like it's, especially if it's an anniversary or a birthday, like they might remember that you were a great server and had a good experience, but like you're not really changing their life. And I wanted to do something where I was like, I want to make an impact on someone that really not only affects their moment but will affect them in a positive way for years to come and for the rest of their lives. So,
and potentially their family and they're like their kids, like, you know, so.
Yeah. So God, once again, introduced me to someone that I met through working in hospitality, right? He became a regular, incredible person. And he's like family, right? And he is in finance and very successful. And he is back and forth between Boston and Florida and always just kind of treated me like a daughter, right? Really, the way he cared. And it wasn't just like, oh, he came in, he took good care of me. It was like he took time to learn who I was. And one day he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? You know, like I didn't really understand the context. And he's like, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I haven't really thought about it. Like, I know I don't want to do this, but like, I could go work in treatment. But at this point in my life, I have all these bills, right? And like, I would not be able to support my current lifestyle by starting from the bottom in the treatment world. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just where my life had taken me. And he was like, have you ever thought about finance? And it was like light bulb, because I had, right? I had thought about it. And he was like, I think you'd be really good at it. You know, you're really good with people, your follow-up, you have a great memory. You mentioned that you like math, which is like not a lot of us do. He's like, you should like explore that option.
Yeah.
You know, so I did. And I took a huge leap of faith because I went from making not steady money, but consistently really good money because, you know, working on the water in Florida as a server and bartender, especially in season, I mean, it's not a bad gig. It's not a bad gig. But thankfully, I have an incredible husband, and he was like extremely supportive of my goals and my dreams. And he said, you need to do this. I don't care what it takes. I will support us. You need to do this.
Yeah.
And so I did. And I, you know, did my research. I got my licensing that I needed to get done in order to start looking for jobs in that world. And I realized that I like working with, I mean, I like people, right? But there's something different about working with someone who understands where I've been, and for me to understand where they've been. And I thought back and I sat long and hard and tried to figure out what path I wanted to go in the finance world. Because everyone wants to work with the doctors and the lawyers and the business owners and, you know, the people that they think when they think of, they see dollar signs. That's not me, right? I want to work with people that I can pick up the phone and call you. We could have never met, and it can feel like we've known each other for years. That's the kind of people I want to work with. So I said, I want to work with people like myself. And I want to work with people in recovery. And I want to teach people what it's like to have a healthy relationship with money. Because looking back, it's like you get sober and you get all these great relationships back, right? Your family comes back, your friends come back. The relationships that you build in recovery are set with intention. But what about the relationship with money? We're not taught how to have a relationship with money. Ever, whether you're an addict, alcoholic, or just a normal person. They don't teach it in school. So financial literacy is not something that just comes naturally. They teach you how to use a protractor, but they don't teach you how to have a healthy budget. And, you know, I can speak for myself that my years of running, I mean, yeah, I made money, but how long did I hold on to that money? Right? And so to retrain your brain, like how to not have impulsive habits when it comes to spending, I don't care how many years of sobriety you have. If it's not something that you have worked on or had education around, it's not something that comes natural, right? Like you get sober, and how many people get sober and just go and get a bunch of tattoos, right? Or get a nice car or gold chains or whatever, right? I mean, I'm speaking of people in South Florida, like that's the norm down there, but I'm sure it's
Gucci
pretty much
belts,
everywhere.
Yeah, you know, the whole nine. Yeah.
100%. And I'm not saying that you don't deserve those things, but like we have this incredible life now. that is really beyond our wildest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can think now, like if I were to ask you, you said you just celebrated 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So 10 years ago, flashback. If I asked you 10 years ago where you would have saw yourself in 5 years or 10 years, in that moment, what would you have said?
Definitely not where I am now. I wouldn't have had kids. I wouldn't have like done all that. But I love my kids, love my, you know. But financially, I would have no idea.
Right.
It's an interesting question. The same thing as like when people are like, "What do you want to see yourself in the next 5 years?" It's
right.
Like, I don't know.
If you would have asked me 5-10 years ago where I saw myself in 5 or 10 years, I would have looked at you sideways and been like, I don't even know where I'm going to be tomorrow. And now, when someone asks you, right, where you see yourself in 5 or 10 years, right, you said your daughters are 7. So you can look forward and you're like, okay, in 5 years, they'll be 12. In 10 years, they'll be 17. Like, so you kind of have a picture, right? Because of the life you've built, you can kind of picture your future now. So it's like, now we have this image of the future. How do we get there, right? How do we make sure that that image, those dreams, those goals come to fruition? How do we maintain that healthy relationship with money, get those goals to happen, and just like honestly continue to live and have fun at the same time? And it's just been really awesome working with people that like, it really does impact like every single person I talk to. I truly believe I leave an impression on. And it's not just the people who are newly sober, right? Honestly, the ones who are newly sober have more of a difficult time with this because you're so constantly thinking about how not to have a drink or drug. It's the people who have stability in their lives and have years of sobriety that it really makes the impact on. The people who have the houses, who have the kids, who have the good job, who have the income. They know how to make money. We all know how to make money. Do we know how to preserve it? Do we know how to keep
spend it too?
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's been incredible. And I have honestly connected with people all over the country. I have clients ranging from Montana to California to Utah to Colorado, everywhere. And honestly, I'm grateful that I have phenomenal people that I work with that have been able to connect me with like people that they respect and care about as well. But I've hustled to build my business as well. You know, I will call anyone, right? I connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm going to call you. You know, I have no fear around it. And I kind of just let go of that. Initially, I did, for sure. I was like, well, what if they say no? You know, fear of rejection. My, isms are coming back out and, ego in reverse. And then I said, well, won't I regret it if I don't?
What if they say yes?
What if they say yes, right? What if I don't? And then something happens to them and they weren't able to protect their family? Or what if I don't? And then they work with someone else and don't have the same relationship that we've been able to build. And like, I truly believe that the people I work with, they're not just my clients, they're my friends.
Yeah.
We have a great relationship. I text them on their birthday. I have a client that lives a couple states, in South Carolina and never met him. And he came down for Recovery Dodgeball last week and got to go and meet him in person.
That's
and
awesome.
It was really cool,
Yeah.
And it's like, I get these, like, I get the warm and fuzzies from it. And it's really, I don't know how to describe it, but I really have, like, not to be cliche, but I really have found my purpose.
So I think the first time that we spoke, right, because like there was a few things that like popped into my head about like when I was thinking back to our initial conversation, right? Like we obviously hit it off right away and we're able to talk very loosely about like, not only our past, but like, finances and like what I have thought about, what I haven't thought about. And then when you just were like, you gave me an example of like what the next 5 years or 7 years is supposed to look like for me. I'm like, double braces. Like immediately I'm like the anxiety's kicking on, right?
But that's the thing. We want to eliminate that anxiety.
Right. So that's where I was going with it. So it's like, it's almost, I assume, right, that you're able to kind of not only retrain a lot of people like me, their brain on like relationship with money, but also like how to make my money work for me.
100%. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Inflation isn't going backwards.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And like, that's like, I'm like I said before on the first call, right. And I'll say it again, right, on a public forum. So this way I hold myself accountable. because I am the king of like, we're gonna link up, whatever. And then
I'll stay on you.
Well, I already know that. And kudos to you for that. But like, so it's like something that I need in my life, right? Because I've never actually in early sobriety, I went through like the whole shiny stuff. Like I want like the shiny, the belt. And then like I realized like, what am I trying to be, like the coolest kid on the short bus? Like, what am I doing here?
Everyone. That's what everyone goes through.
But now it's like, it's very apparent, right? That like, I need to have a plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, like if there's a plan that's going to be able to kind of like fund some either emergency things or whatever the case may be, that would be absolutely crucial.
Yeah. And, I don't, not to get too much into the nitty gritty of like how we do things, and that, we'll dive into further on like a personal call, but like the whole name of the game is like, obviously make sure your future looks good, make sure your family like is taken care of. But like going back to like, we didn't get sober not to have fun. Like we don't set up a financial plan to eliminate fun. We like still want everyone to have fun. 30% of your budget should be fun. That's a nice chunk.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
In my mind, it's like it all kind of comes full circle for me. It's like I got sober so I could have a full life. I set up a plan for myself so I can have a full life. They go kind of intertwined.
Well, that's literally what I said to you the first time, right? It was like, no matter how you cut it, the way that I see it right now, and I know it's much more than this, but for me to understand it the way my brain works is like, you're literally a financial sponsor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you are literally someone like myself that would turn to you and be like, Laura, like I'm thinking about this, right? And you're like, maybe not the best idea, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like, hey, Laura, I'm thinking about, or like, I'm not really too concerned about that. And you're like, you really should be, because 10 years from now, it could be this. I'm always on like the go 24/7. And like, if we just, and we're not even talking about a lot of energy, right? We're just talking about like kind of, I would assume, right? Like a couple calls, right? A couple follow-ups, a couple restructures, and like it could set me up for
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And it's like, I think a lot of people, there's multiple reasons that a lot of people haven't done anything yet, right? And everyone has their own reason. But I think a lot of the main reasons that I see are, one, they think it's going to cost them a lot of money. And like, that could be true. That's not how I work. Nothing I do is like money will never like leave your hand to my hand. I don't charge by the hour. I don't have like charge by the meeting. It doesn't work like that. I truly want to do what's in the best interest of my clients. So I put together a plan that works for them within their budget. And like, if you want to do all of it, amazing, right? It's setting you up. If you want to do some of it and do it in baby steps, great. If you say, listen, I appreciate it, but like now's not the right time, cool, not a problem, right? And like at the end of the day, I know that regardless of what someone does or doesn't do, I at least helped educate, right? And so I did my part. I cleaned my side of the street. I did, in those kind of words. And then I think another main reason is because of our past. People feel that if they go to a regular advisor and they tell them, well, I'm behind the 8 ball, man. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol for a long time, or I have a criminal background or whatever, they're going to feel judged, right? Because there is the stigma. Well, guess what? I've been there. There's no judgment. We'll laugh about it, if anything, and that's how a lot of my conversations go, is that we end up laughing about the people we used to be because we can now.
Well, think about it. Like, I know for me, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like, where would I'll tell you, I would never be talking to a financial, a financial person. Cause I was just like trying to figure out how I get my phone bill out of my mother's name and make it on time.
Right. 100%. Me too, though.
So it was like, this was never, you want to talk about like God's grace, right? Like it's an unmerited gift. Like I was never supposed to be here. The fact that we're having conversations about money and like how to progress and like furthering my money, without somebody like you, like I don't think about stuff like that,
right?
And that's just me being honest, right? There might be people in there that be like, well, you should be. Well, no shit. But like, I don't think about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I would assume that the majority of the people that you speak with and work with don't think like that. Don't think like that either.
No. And honestly, a lot of people that I call are like, you know what? I've been thinking about this a lot lately and haven't done anything. So you called at the perfect time. Or it's really funny that you called because my wife and I have been, thinking about how we need to have a conversation like this or whatever. Honestly, a lot of the time it is right in your mind. It's something maybe in the back of your head that like is something that you know you need to do. But you're busy and you're helping people on a regular basis. And then you go home, you have a wife, you've got your kids. It's like, it's not that it's not important to you. It's just not number one on your list of a million things to do.
Mm-hmm.
So when I call and I approach someone and I mention like, hey, this is who I am and this is what I do, like sometimes the timing is spot on and sometimes it's not. And they're like, hey, listen, actually, this is awesome. I love what you're doing. Like, business just started. Follow up with me in 6 months. Cool. I will, you know? And that's the thing. Like, I am a woman of integrity and intention. And if I say I'm going to do something and if I follow up with someone, I will.
Shit. She remembered.
I don't forget anything.
Can we run it back in 6 months? So, I mean, we could talk so much about like what you do. What is it actually called? Because I know you came up with like a creative name for it.
Yeah, so I think, I'll be honest. So right now, I call it financial sobriety. I am working with an incredible, I want to say content creator, brand strategy, social media guru, for lack of better words. Her and her team are incredible. And so one of my main goals for 2025 is to really enhance my social media platform and presence. Will the name change? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I'm calling it financial sobriety.
Okay. And how, as of right now, like how would people find you?
Sure. On Instagram, I have a financial sobriety page. It is connected to my personal page, and my personal page is @_L Lauren Lyons, and then financial sobriety. You can link right to there. I'm on LinkedIn. That is like my biggest source of. I would say that's like my main business page, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a business Facebook yet. It is probably something that I will build for 2025. But I feel like a lot of people have LinkedIn. A lot of people, especially a lot of people in the recovery world do, especially B2B.
Anybody that's going to be wanting to speak to you has a LinkedIn.
For the most part, for the most part. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So, you know, feel free for anyone to send me a message. My husband will tell you. It could be 9:00 at night and someone from California will message me because it's 6:00 there. And I'm like, I got to answer this. And he's the best. My husband, he does not care. You know, he's like, I get it. You have to answer. He supports my business and me building my business. And it's not even work for me. It's really not. When you love what you do, it's no longer work. Yeah.
I mean, he sounds like the man, your husband. So maybe,
he's the best.
Maybe one day I'll meet him. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But maybe we'll fly him up here or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like having that support is huge. You know?
Yeah. I couldn't do life without him. I couldn't have done this job without him. There's a lot of things in this world that I could not have done without him.
Yeah.
And he would probably say that I would have done it anyway. But that's just because he's like the most modest human being there is on this planet. But truthfully, I think regardless of what you're doing in life, I think in sobriety and in life, like having a support system like that, someone to come home to that like truly makes you a better person every day and sees the best in you, even when you're feeling down on yourself, is like more than anything and anyone could ask for. And like, again, you know, God put him in my life 100%.
Absolutely. Now, like when you're working, I'm sure it's a little bit of both, right? But are you doing the majority of your work like at home, right? Like, you know, obviously cold calling you are, but like, are you like traveling the nation if need be?
So I actually go in the office most days. I do get more, I would say, honestly, I'm pretty self-motivated. So I shouldn't say I get more done in the office. However, the resources are more readily available in the office. Like if I need help, with anything from, you know, back office kind of things. I have a lot of mentorship there, which is incredible. So from that aspect, it's much easier to go in the office. I also have a business partner that I do most of my work with. His name's Vincent. Again, God gave me Vincent, right? He is not in recovery, but is touched by it, had, you know, familial experiences with it. Super, super faith-driven human, incredible morals, great integrity, and is everyone's best friend. Like everyone loves him. And he has taught me pretty much everything I know, and he never says no, right? Like, we went on our honeymoon, my husband and I, and he kept business going, kept meetings going while I was gone without me having to do anything.
That's
it was
crucial.
like still going. And so like he's in the office every day. So like I enjoy going there and brainstorming with him. And, you know, I do think make a really good team as far as a work partnership goes. So having him in the office, you know, it drives me to be there as well, because I do think that we can get a lot more done while I'm there. But yeah, I mean, I could really work remote. And then as far as traveling goes, I went to Global Exchange, which really isn't traveling the nation. That was going
around
up to Orlando. Yeah.
Which was only like a day this year,
I only went for one day. We took the train.
Okay.
Thankfully, because that was the day of the hurricane and everyone was evacuating. So the traffic was not fun.
Yeah.
But I have been invited to a ton of events, truthfully, mostly in California, because everyone in California is like, yeah, you should fly out for this event. I'm like, yeah, sounds great, right? Like,
have me out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, a Vegas symposium is going on in February, and someone that I'm connected with like told me that, you know, I should come to Vegas. It's February 18th to 20th, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I would love to, right? Zach Clark is the keynote speaker, and I think there's a bunch of really incredible people that are going to be there. And as my business progresses and I have more flexibility within my schedule, and I don't have to hustle maybe quite as hard, right? Because I'm still in the newer stages of building my business, and I think at that point I'll be able to travel more. But right now it's put your head down and grind time. Yeah.
I mean, also, as you know, right, and as your husband probably knows too, right? Like, there's right now no meeting is a bad meeting.
No,
you know, so it's like we're always just trying to make disconnections.
Well, exactly.
You know, you never know who's going to make that next referral.
And that's what I say. I tell everyone, I'm calling you to introduce myself, not assuming that you're in need of anything that I do. But I truly believe that any connection is a good connection, especially in recovery.
Yeah.
And that is 100% what I say to every single person when I call them.
Yeah.
And I mean it. So like you said, no meeting's a bad meeting. Every connection is a good connection.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to like say or plug or whatever, you know, whatever it is? I forgot to do the whole YouTube thing again. Right. So hopefully in 2025, when you come out with your channel, you'll be, you know, more versed than I am.
2025 is our year.
You know, but if you've been listening up until this point, you know, we love the support, love the feedback. We are on Instagram at Pain W Purpose, YouTube Pain with a Purpose Podcast, and Apple and Spotify podcast Pain with a Purpose Podcast. I'm supposed to do that like when we first start the episode. I just always forget. I get so excited. I'm like, all right, let's like jump right into it. I should probably just do like a thing,
like an automated one.
Yeah. I'll figure it out. Maybe by season 3.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I just honestly really appreciate you having me up here. I'll be honest, I was a little nervous, not for anything. I don't know. Maybe it's because like any speaking engagement, I think even when like you first get sober and you tell your story, I think there's always like a little bit of like, how am I going to be perceived? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all want to be perceived a certain way. And so I was a little bit nervous, but I was super excited. I'm super grateful. I truly believe that, there is a reason for every single thing. And God is very, very, active and a part of every aspect of my life. And I truly believe that, there was a reason that, Sam did an episode with you, which is how I saw your podcast and the message that you're, giving people on a daily basis, and truly believe that God spoke through me when I reached out to you, because I was like, he's not going to want me on the show, but
listen, I appreciate like the hustler aspect, right?
Yeah.
And then after talking to you, I was like, I think you have a great story to talk about it. Cause like what better story of like literally turning all of your pain and all of your experience into not only like recreating your life, but also directly tying that back into the people that you're able to help with multiple years of sobriety that probably just, do probably fairly well. But just like essentially just like get paid every week or every other week. And it's just like not thinking anything about it.
Yeah. Or it's putting your own things on the back burner, really, and it's life just moves.
Yeah.
Days just happen and time flies. And before you know it, years go by and you're like, oh my God, where did life go? You know?
Yeah. And you're like, oh, all I have is that 401k from my company. Like, I got nothing else.
Right. That I can't touch for 30 years. Like, what am I going to do?
Well, regardless, I do appreciate you making the trip.
Yeah.
Stay warm while you're up here because it's probably only going to get worse. At least it's not raining. So
I know. Thankfully.
But yeah, I appreciate it. And with that, we will see you guys next week.